So hear the Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you're set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands upon her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which to work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, of whom Satan had bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at the wonderful things that he was doing. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
So please be seated. Following on from last week, it kind of carries on this theme of who the Lord is and what happens when, if you like, we have to decide what to do about that. I'm sure everyone's had the experience of talking at cross purposes with people. When you say one thing and then someone else says something completely different, and you realise after a while that you're not actually having the same conversation. And it's one of the kind of maxims, the mores of life, in which we have to deal with the people that we have, not with the people we would like to have, or the people we think we ought to have, or the people we think we deserve. We have to actually deal with the people around us. We have to deal with people, as they are. And one of the kind of challenges of life is to learn about the people around us, isn't it? Especially if you're married, to deal with one's family as they really are themselves. You can't kind of deal with your children as if they're someone else, can you? Otherwise they probably won't take you very seriously. And so, you have to learn about them and you have to get to know them, and that involves a certain kind of listening to them perhaps, observation, a bit of patience sometimes. It means a certain amount of humility, in that it's easy to kind of put on someone what you think they ought to be like. And then we have to actually be attentive and actually watch and listen and learn and think, well, that's who they are really, isn't it? And then we can get to know them properly. And one of the sort of challenges of life is dealing with people sincerely. To not put on an act, to not put on a front, to be real with people, and to, be ourselves, I suppose. It's not an easy thing. And I think these readings all kind of come in that general direction about our relationship with the Lord, about trying to find out who he really is and deal with him as such, and find out who we really are in our response. And so I think it'd be good to just kind of remember what came up last week. There was Jeremiah talking about the false prophets who, although they were using the Lord's name, they were not speaking truthfully about him. And so the Lord's complaint was they were causing my people to forget my name. In other words, they were causing the people to forget who the Lord really is by not speaking truthfully about him. And in this reading from Isaiah, it follows on the beginning of the chapter is all about people going through various observances, about fasting actually, and it says you bow like reeds in the wind. They're always bowing over like this, and God finds their bowing kind of boring, because he says it's not me you're bowing to, it's got nothing to do with me. All this stuff you're doing isn't about me, it's about something else. Why are you doing it, he's saying. And this part that we come into, if you remove the yoke from among you, he's saying, I'm not actually interested in whether you turn up to church, to paraphrase very, very freely, What I'm really interested in is how you think about me and how you deal with each other. And so he said this yoke he's talking about is the way that we put burdens upon each other, the way we put constraints on each other, and of course the injustice of being oppressive if we're employers. I think not many of us are employers, so it probably doesn't apply to us very much. But the pointing of the finger, I think in that particular idiom it's really talking about, I don't know, just gossip and innuendos and talking nonsense, really. The speaking of evil. But all these kind of things, all the evil that they're doing, and it's a real mixture here of what you might call the profound social injustice of, of employment law, of oppression to the poor and everything, but also just of being nasty neighbours, or just being spiteful on a casual sort of daily personal basis. It's all kind of mixed up together. And then he goes on in the second part of this reading from Isaiah about trampling the Sabbath, which is an observance. But he's saying, what are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for me? Out of delight for me, the Lord, your maker, your redeemer? Or are you just serving your own purposes on it? And that's why I think it's about remembering who he is, who he really is, and dealing with him as he is. And I'd like to bring to mind that book which we're going to be looking at in the autumn. I know that last course we did, the apologetics, was quite kind of heavy duty, intellectually speaking. This one will not be like that. It's a kind of, I won't say it's lightweight, but it's basically a kind of contemplation. It's a kind of meditation on the idea of Jesus' heart being gentle and lowly. And it's a kind of extended application of that. And so it's not really trying to be intellectual about it, it's trying to get our own personal response about that. And so the Lord that says this is the Lord whose heart is gentle and lowly. That is who he is. And the psalm which we sang, we actually opened up with the hymn, which is based on that psalm. And as I was reading it through, I was thinking this is a kind of hymn about grace, the whole thing. It's a song about the Lord's grace to us. It begins, bless the Lord, O my soul, all that kind of thing. But if you read the whole psalm, the reason that the psalmist wants to bless the Lord is because he's convinced that the Lord is kind and gentle, that he is merciful, that he is compassionate. And it's really worth, I think, remembering that word compassionate. The Lord feels compassion for us. He feels, if you like, our pain. He also feels our weakness. He feels that, he notices when we do things that are wrong or not that great. But he doesn't, if you like, come down like a ton of bricks on it immediately, thinking, He knows why we did it. He knows why we are the way we are. He knows that we are but dust, as it says in the scriptures. And this whole song is based on the idea that the Lord knows our frailty, he knows our weaknesses, he knows why we do things that are wrong, and he says, and he forgives. Basically, he's kind, he's gracious, he's merciful and compassionate. And one of the exhortations that the Lord often makes to us is he wants us to be kind and compassionate as well. And often if I'm talking about marriage with couples preparing to marry, that's one of the themes I want to bring up is please have compassion on each other. Because you're going to wind each other up at some point. It's bound to happen. And when you do, please have compassion on each other. Be merciful to each other. But that applies universally, really, doesn't it? With all our dealings with each other. And so that psalm, I think, is a lovely hymn about the Lord's grace, his mercy, his compassion. But at the other end of it, which is, all this feels kind of nice, Luke warned us last week. Jesus said there will come opposition. I've come not to bring peace but division. And here in this story today is an example of that division. He showed grace and mercy, He showed power to deliver this woman from her affliction. It says in Greek that she had a spirit of weakness, a spirit of frailty or infirmity. I have no idea what that means in real life, but it afflicted her for 18 years. And one of the sort of curious things is that if you write 18 in Greek, you actually write the letters IE, which is a short way of saying Jesus. And in some early manuscripts of the New Testament, they'd actually written the IE for 18 and then put a little line over it, because they thought the fact it was 18 years, and then 18 looks a bit like the first letters of the name Jesus in Greek, they kind of felt significant. That if you like, this was a sign waiting to happen, that the woman's affliction would be fulfilled in this moment when she would be delivered, and then she would be praising the Lord for this. It's the kind of thing which doesn't really work on our minds, but I think they used to think it was important. But he shows her this grace and this kindness. He delivers her quite spontaneously without being asked. And it provokes anger. I mean, why would someone be angry about that? The ruler of the synagogue's angry because it's broken the Sabbath. Wasn't that what Isaiah was saying? You know, observe the Sabbath. But who for? Who is the Lord? The ruler of the synagogue had forgotten who the Lord really is. Because when the Lord appeared, he didn't recognize him. Jesus is Lord. He was standing there in front of him, and the ruler of the synagogue didn't recognize him. Can you think about that for a moment? If Jesus walked in today, would we recognize him? Would we in our hearts leap with joy and gladness, seeing something in him, think, wow, who is this? Or would we feel a very kind of shuddering horror, thinking, who is this? I mean, that's the effect he had on people. And so this man responded in this way. And there's this lovely pun in Greek. It says, won't you loose your animals on the Sabbath so you can give them something to drink? Or shouldn't I loose this woman from her bondage? The animals are tied up, and she's been tied up. Can't we loose them on this day of rest? That's his kind of pun. But the opposition comes after Jesus has just given this warning. Luke is telling us something here. And just before this passage, Jesus actually says, unless you repent, you too will perish, talking about a natural disaster that had happened. If you like, he's offering us a warning. This heart who is gentle and lowly is nevertheless warning us about the way we respond to him, basically. And the writer to the Hebrews follows through on that warning. He says, see that you do not refuse the one who is speaking, the one who speaks to us. For he says, we, in the Lord, in Jesus, have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the innumerable angels and festal gathering, to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant. Something better than that which was before. Something that cannot be seen by us now, but nevertheless something that is real and something which is before us. You know, as we gather together in the Lord's name, spiritually, if you like, we're in the presence of all these things. Spiritually, we're before the festal angels. We're before the throne of the living God. We're before the heavenly city. We're before the courts of the living God. Before the courts of heaven. And so the writer to the Hebrews says, do not refuse the one who is speaking. Don't refuse that throne. Don't forget who he is. Because he says at the end, our God is a consuming fire. He is a consuming fire. He is holy. He is the one who will make all things new. And as we remember the words of the Lord's Prayer, you know, it says Father at the beginning, and then it says the three, if you like, commands. Hallowed be your name. Done be your will. Come be your kingdom. Sorry, I got them in the wrong order. Hallowed be your name. Come be your kingdom. Done be your will, on earth as it is in heaven. And I wondered sort of why we would say that, because We can't actually make it happen as such, in that the Lord will do what he wants to do, irrespective of us. But when we say that, if you like, we proclaim it, but we bring ourselves into agreement with it, if we mean it. We, if you like, align ourselves with the holiness of the Lord's name, with the coming of his kingdom, with the doing of his will. It begins in us, but then we can also become part of that hallowing, of that coming, of that doing. But only if we remember who he is, and if we go with it, if you like. In the Eastern Church, they say if we participate in it, if we somehow join in with it. And so I think if I wanted to gather together all the things today, I'd say that's what they're all saying together. Remember the Lord's grace, because he knows of what we are made. He is compassionate on us. Remember, his heart is gentle and lowly, and we can come before him, not because it doesn't matter what we do, but because his grace is bigger than the things we do wrong. His goodness is greater than our weakness, and because he is kind and gracious. And we cast ourselves on that mercy, knowing that there is nothing of ourselves that we can bring to make him better, or make ourselves better, but knowing full well that he can make us well, he can make us new, and that he will come soon, and that he is our life and our strength. And take to heart the words he is speaking. He is our Maker and our Redeemer. He is our King and our God, and he is gentle and lowly. He is kind and good. Thank you all. Amen.